This is Entrepreneurs Get Visible, the podcast for people who want more impact, influence, and income. I'm Anna Parker-Naples, and I'll be sharing with you proven methods from leading entrepreneurs that help you get visible as an authority in your field. Because anything's possible when you get visible. I have Dr. Joanna Martin on the show with me today, and we're talking about a really important topic that many of you probably need to hear right now. Impact without burnout. How do you build your brand, build your credibility, make a difference in the world while still looking after yourself and not reaching that total overwhelm? So thank you so much for coming on the show today, Jo.
It's a pleasure to be here, Anna. I'm really looking forward to it.
Now, you have quite an incredible organisation that you lead and actually help. You're the founder of One of Many, and I have heard so many amazing recommendations and referrals for One of Many and your work. So tell us a little bit about what you do, what that is.
Well, it kind of started back when I'd just given birth to my son. He was about 6 weeks old. And any mums out there will know how that precious moment is when you're holding this tiny little person. I was breastfeeding him in this darkened room, and you have all of these creative ideas and, of course, no time to do anything with them. You know, I was, as an entrepreneur, I had a million ideas, but no time. I had one of these wake-up moments where, I don't know if you've ever heard that quote from the Dalai Lama that gets bandied about a bit in women's circles, that he said at the Vancouver Peace Summit in 2009, that the world will be saved by the Western woman. Now, I don't know that he was necessarily meaning Western women. I think he means women of resources, do you know, because there's just as many of them in Africa and the Middle East and all around the world. But I think what he was getting at is this: women with resources and compassion are what it's going to take to change the world. And I'd heard this before, but in that moment when I was feeding James, I was reflecting on this. And it dawned on me that he wasn't talking about the Hillary Clintons of the world or the Kamala Harrises of the world or the Theresa Mays of the world. He's talking about us, you know, you and me and my neighbor and my sister and my grandmother and my auntie, women who, what I would now call grassroots women leaders. We're women who can lead from within, wherever we are, with an impact in our community, an impact in our organization, through our small business. And I truly believe that if enough of us women step up into the small or large leadership roles that we're being called to, if we can find the courage to do that, but more importantly, the sustainability to do it, to be able to do it without burning out, then I think we truly can change the world. I really believe if we can get to 50-50 leadership across all domains, that the world will have changed to get there.
I 100% understand that. And for me, you talk about calling. For me, I felt very much that I had this wake up moment that I knew I was capable of so much more than I was doing and living. But what does it look like when I step out of the bounds of being that mum at home and having the children and actually say, no, this is me too. I can be that and I can do that, but there's more. And a lot of my work is driven by the desire to help people rise within themselves, step into that potential and make things happen. But the reality of that, I mean, like you, I'm very ambitious, I'm driven, I'm purposeful in what I do. But I have a busy household. I have children, I have a husband, I have a household, I've got school runs. Right now, I don't have to take the children to the clubs because we're back down in lockdown. But I'm sure like you, Jo, it's how do you step into that leadership when you have so much going on in your own life?
Well, I think it's got to start with a paradigm shift, Anna. That's the thing that we start with women, which sounds like a big place to start. We've got to shift paradigm. But I think it's because...
Just like that.
Just like that. Ready? Ready, say, let's go. But I think for so many women, and I think this impacts men as well, you know, culturally, if we kind of look at it. But for women especially, we live in a space where we think that the only way to impact is to be more of the archetype of what I call superwoman. Superwoman is the archetype of our times. Do you know? She is awesome at work. She's awesome with family. You know, she's awesomely getting her manicures and pedicures and going to the gym and doing the clubs and doing the school runs and doing everything and getting the dinner on the table. And there's this expectation. We have such huge expectations of ourselves. And I believe that our superwoman energy is a highly adrenalized energy. It's an energy which is capable of burning us out if we stay in it too long. Mm-hmm. So the first thing we need to do is to shift and know that if we do shift, there's another way of leading. Most people don't step up into greater impact because they think it just means more burnout, more superwoman. But what we talk about at One of Many is the fact that there's a completely different way of operating where we can be just as effective and just as fruitful, if not more so, but without all of the downside, without the highly adrenalized downside. And we call it soft power. And it's a far better way to operate from.
It's interesting that you talk about that adrenalized action, because we're talking today off the back of my book launch. And any of you who are listening who follow my work will know that it was kind of a crazy day for me yesterday, hitting number 1 in 37 categories, which still kind of blows my mind.
So awesome, Anna. Well done.
Even just being able to say that sentence, I just can't really believe it's not sunk in. But I was on an adrenaline high. You can't function at that level all the time. It's not possible. And I'm really open with people. You might see this shiny result. You might see that I'm having impact and I'm a global bestseller and all of those accolades and achievements. But behind that sits my family who had a really shitty pesto pasta tea. The kitchen is a mess. The house is a disaster zone, because you can't do everything all at the same time. And particularly not if you're trying to function on that adrenaline, because it doesn't work.
And I think this is a key piece, right? Is the recognition that if we're going to do an adrenaline push like that, we are geared up to do that for 15 minutes. Not even 15 days, certainly not 15 months. And most women who come into our community have been operating in that kind of state for an exceptionally long time, some of them for years. And it's that which is, I think, the thing that is holding us most back from our leadership and from our impact, is because we think that that's the way that everybody does it. And unfortunately, it has been the way that women have done it, because thankfully to our foremothers and foreaunts and foregrandmothers that opened the doors for us to even step into the workplace, not that long ago, really, if you look at it from an evolutionary perspective. We've kind of got a seat at the table, but what we're thinking, we have to play the game the way that our male counterparts play the game. And to be fair, they've got a shed load of testosterone in their bodies, which is that focus hormone, right? That allows them to focus in, to aggressively go after a goal. They've got a bunch more of it than we do. When we run out of testosterone for that kind of result, we start running on adrenaline. I think this is why women suffer from job stress and burnout at a 60% higher rate than men do, because of the hormonal balance. I think this is a critical piece we miss. So we have to find a way to work that works with our natural advantages and natural beingness of our femaleness, if you like.
Interesting. You talk about the hormone impact of how we operate, because it's huge. It's huge. And not just whether there's more estrogen or testosterone, but the cycles that we go through.
Absolutely. And I think we totally overlook our cycles, right?
Yes.
I mean, 7 days before my period arrives, it's what I call doomsday. And it does not matter what anyone says to me. The world is ending.
Yeah.
It's the day to homeschool my children and divorce my husband and fire half my staff. To be fair, they're all brilliant. But it's on that day, we've got this added little piece. But then, just after our period, we often have like superpowers. We have huge amounts of energy for longer days. One of the things we talk about a lot in our community, as soon as people are inside anyway, we don't put it out there at the front, but is how to work in, I guess, collaboration with your own inner cycles to be able to harness your superpower times and know when you need to be resting and pulling back and organizing your schedule around it makes a huge difference.
But even, Joanna, that we're having that conversation about we're successful women. We have tribes. We have people looking to us. But if we don't mention that we fall and that it happens often, then we can't really lead in the way that we need to lead. So I've just had this book launch. 10 days before that, I could have walked away from everything. I would have quite happily not picked the kids up from school and just sort of driven off into the sunset, closed the business down, disappeared, shut all my social media accounts. But that's not really who I am. That's not really what I want. But it's very easy, particularly as you go towards your 40s and your mid-40s and beyond, to lose yourself in some of that. I'm really curious about why the burnout matters to you. I'm sure there's a burnout story sitting behind what you're doing and why you're driven to share this, Joanna.
Yeah, absolutely there is. I started my working life as a medical doctor, actually. And whilst I was great at it, I knew it wasn't my calling, it wasn't my thing. So alongside school, whilst I was at school, I'd also done a lot of drama. So, I did what every self-respecting doctor does and left it and went to drama school.
You went to drama school. Where did you go?
The Actors Centre Australia, which is the old stomping ground of Hugh Jackman and Nicole Kidman and so on. Not while I was there, unfortunately.
No, but I'm an actor, so that's my background. At the Actors Company in London is where I trained. But that's really interesting because more people in this kind of leadership space, so many of us have performance backgrounds somewhere in our past.
Yeah, I think it makes a difference, right? It really does help. And I think it was whilst I was there that I came across the industry that I'm now in, which is the coaching industry. I didn't even know it existed. It certainly wasn't at my career's day. But I then, alongside drama school, started a small coaching practice. But before long, I was headhunted by one of the fastest growing personal development companies on the planet at that time. And I became their head of research and training. So it was a dream job. I was in my late 20s at the time, and I was flying all around the world. I would have weekends where I was in LA one weekend at the Wilton Theatre, then I'm over at the Excel Centre in London, 3,000 people at a time, and then back in Sydney the next weekend, which was fabulously glamorous, but my body was not keeping up. And I remember on my 30th birthday thinking I can no longer stand on stage and say, these tools help you to create a great life, where I was no longer in control of my life. This was the interesting thing for me at that time. I was looking at the other men in the organization, other trainers that I had hired and brought on, and they were all doing great. They could fly, they could perform, they could party all night and get up and do it all again the next day. And I really felt there was something lacking in my physicality, in my body. I felt like my body was letting me down. But then when I nearly burnt out by my 30th birthday, I resigned and my contract there, I finished my contract and took a rest. And during that time, I started really looking into what would it look like to operate from a different way of being. And I came across a lot of books and courses and things on the difference between masculine and feminine energy, which I had so much judgment around femininity. There is no way I wanted to be associated with what I thought femininity meant. But as I looked into it and I appreciated that actually at a cultural level, we're spending a lot of time in what I now call the masculine paradigm, where it's all about achievement, where we celebrate values such as individualism and competition. And there is no space at a cultural level, there's hardly any space for us to rest, to be, to collaborate, community, family, humility. We're always in active mode and never in passive. There's no balance at a cultural level. And I saw this clearly in my own life. And so it was during that time that I started to dig in on what does it mean? What is feminine power? What is this thing? And that's where I came across, because I saw at that time no role models of strong feminine women. They were all strong but highly masculinized. And I always think of Maggie Thatcher over here in the UK, of that kind of the Iron Lady, immensely strong woman, but very masculine paradigm.
You've got to be very ballsy to make it because it's a man's world.
Right, exactly. And they were the only references I had for strong women. So I looked into archetypes, and I looked into Jung's archetypes, and he talks about the 4 archetypes of the mature feminine. He talks about the queen energy, the mother energy, the lover energy, and what I call sorceress energy. And we've also added a 5th in our work, the warrioress energy, because I think there is so much we can do from our warrioress energy as well. So at One of Many, we work now with these 5 women's power types, and there is nothing weak about queen. There is nothing weak about mother. There's nothing weak about lover energy. These are powerful energies, but they're also anchored in our softer nature, And by softer, I don't mean warrioress will stand up and fight. She'll chain herself to a tree if she needs to. She'll do what she needs to do. But when the fight's done, she shakes it out. She parties. She rests. She comes back inward. And for each of these, there's more of this balance.
Because you can't fight all the time.
You can't do it all of the time. And we need to be able to move between each of these. We need to move out of our, you're clearly a great queen energy, someone who holds a vision for her realm. You've got a really clear direction. You're taking your community, but you can't stay in that all of the time. If you stay in queen energy all of the time, your team burn out because they sacrifice themselves for the vision. You've got to come into your mother energy, for instance, in leadership and check in on how everyone's doing. You've got to come into your lover energy to replenish yourself and restore. So we need to be able to move between these. But the thing is, in our culture, most of these, we're allowed mother, and that's it. Culturally, that is the only one of these archetypes which is kind of celebrated. And even then, she's only allowed over there in the domain of caretaking. We're not allowed to do it at work, or we're seen to be weak, etc.
Looking historically in cultural history, you were the mother and the obedient wife, or you were the witch. And you talk about sorceress because that's a really powerful, evocative word, because the sorceress knows her own value, knows her own worth, knows her own power, but isn't having to put it out there all the time. She holds that knowledge within. And that's not a witch. That's not a witch in the kind of, let's go and drown them in the river. Let's go and burn them at the stake. Because it's okay to embrace the other parts of you. That's what we're talking about here.
Yeah, for us, we chose that word, I think, because we wanted to reference this part of us which connects to something greater than us. And all of us have a different name for that. Some call it God, some call it Allah, some call it, Lakshmi or Sarasvati, Buddha consciousness or quantum physics. It doesn't matter what we call it, but we kind of shorthanded at One Many to source, that source energy that we draw from. So for us, sorceress kind of felt like the right reference for that. And I think because of, what happened 500-600 years ago to women when that power was so stripped from us and, debased, and we were literally burned at the stake for our inner wisdom and that knowledge. The women's wisdom, I think, has been really suppressed a lot in recent centuries. And I think what we're seeing at the moment, and what I really feel powerfully this moment in history has available for us, is that what we need now is that women's wisdom. Or it is not just women's wisdom. It's that intuitive wisdom. It's something that men and women have access to, but it is something that is, if we allow it as women, it is how we can operate, operating from our intuition, from our knowingness, and stepping into that calling or purpose work without feeling that we have to always go after the trappings of what our cultures tell us is right.
One of the things that I see as people rise and they find the thing they want to be doing and it feels so purposeful is then doing too much of it.
Yes.
And that's where the burnout sits. So let's talk a little bit about that and dissect. When we're talking about burnout, what are the most common experiences that you see with the women leaders who work with you?
Well, most of the women who come into our community would not call themselves burned out until they've been in the community for about 6 months, and then they go, oh, now I get it. They're often just exhausted. So it looks like exhaustion, the kind of exhaustion that no amount of sleep does enough, the kind of exhaustion where their thinking's just a little slower, like they're not deciding as well as they would like, or it's not even necessarily expressing itself symptomatically, but they're just feeling pulled in a million different directions and they know that something's got to give. So that's kind of how it shows up. And I guess the causality of it, what's happening underneath it very often is that we are falling into oftentimes martyr archetype, where we are prioritizing other people's needs as higher than our own. So because mother is the only one we're allowed, so, kind of culturally, we tend to then think that, okay, therefore we need to sacrifice for everybody all of the time. We put our boss's needs ahead of our own. We put our kids' needs ahead of our own. And, that's a thing that we do. That's normal. That's a normal, natural part of life that we put our kids' needs ahead of our own. But we also put our neighbours and our friends and the other mummies at the school gate and what they think. And we put all of their needs before our own. And we forget the basics. We forget the basics like get enough sleep. The basics like, have you had 2 liters of water to drink today? The basics like, did you stop for lunch? Did you go outside and take some fresh air? And
did you live?
Exactly. This is one of the biggest shifts that women kind of discover when they start working with us, is that if they can attend to the basics, The real basics, just what we call their replenishable needs, those things which we just need to pay attention to every day. The shift is dramatic. And then they're far more easily able to live from their queen energy, from their sorceress energy, from their lover energy, just by taking care of the basic needs. It's such a critical piece to look at.
What happens? What's the what if this isn't addressed?
The what if it isn't addressed is that we end up on our knees and actually burned out. And I have seen women who can't stop weeping because they can't pick themselves up. Chronic fatigue, ME sort of diagnoses. I've seen women who've come in with cancer diagnoses and so on. Women whose marriages have collapsed because they've been spending so long in that masculinized superwoman energy that their partner, who is probably also very masculine energy, whether it's a woman or a man, they're at loggerheads and there's no space for them to be their authentic selves. There's no frisson in the relationship. But I think the thing that is most critical here is that when we get out of touch with our needs and our body telling us what we want, our body is it's our receiver, right? It's our receiver of what I would call the divine kind of, radio waves. Our body is the thing that informs our intuition, that kind of translates those, whatever it is, I don't understand it, but whatever it is that comes in, it's our body that receives it and translates it and gives us that message. So if we're out of touch with our body, we get out of touch with our intuition. And if we're out of touch with our intuition, we're out of touch with our purpose. And if we're out of touch with our purpose, then we don't know why the hell we're doing on this planet, and we can never fulfill on whatever it was we came here to do.
And then we feel lacking. Then we feel everything. No, there's no reason. Why should I bother doing anything? Why should I look after myself?
Exactly. We're purposeless, which feels yucky for you as an individual. But for me, what's more important about that is I believe every single one of us was put on this planet to have a positive impact in some way, shape, or form. And if we're not tending to our body's needs, if we're not tending to the vessel that is our receiver, then we can't hear it. We can't show up to it. We can't find our courage and our bravery for it. And then my kids, your kids, their grandkids, they're the ones who lose out because we can't have that positive impact in the world, which is so necessary right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And particularly with everything going on around us, around the world. And interesting, as we talk about female leaders, and yes, we talk about, the masculine energy. But when you look at some of the countries who are led by feminine women, oh my goodness, they are killing it right now. Who doesn't want to go live in New Zealand?
Exactly right. Jacinda Ardern is just the pin. This is what I'm so excited about right now, Anna, is we are finally seeing role models of this compassionate, strong leadership that I was looking for them 10 years ago and I couldn't see them. Even 6 years ago when we launched the organization, they weren't particularly visible. But now we see them in New Zealand, we see them in Taiwan, we see them in so many of the Nordic states. It's incredible. There's so many opportunities to see great political leaders. And we look at their COVID responses in some of these countries compared to the COVID responses of some very male-led countries. And it's incredible, the difference that is there. And even if it's, not even looking at the strategy, just looking at who the person is being with their people. Do you know? They have a very clear plan. I think everybody needs a clear plan and direction, but they also need vulnerability and authenticity. Just tell us how it really is and how you really are, and I'll believe you more,
Yeah, absolutely. So for someone then who has maybe listened to you today and thought, actually, life isn't quite what it should be right now, where do they start with making sure they recover from ongoing burnout? What do they do?
I think the first thing to do is pay attention to your needs. We talk about 7 rituals for calming the daily chaos here at One of Many, and we've got a fabulous little free training on that, which helps people to understand how they can get more in touch with their needs, what it is that is right for them, and get some little rituals in there every day that can form a real foundation towards replenishment and, if necessary, recovery, So that's a really powerful place to start. But the key piece is to pay attention to your needs. Your body has all the answers. It will tell you everything you need to know if you'll slow down and listen to it long enough. One of those rituals that we highly recommend starting with is some kind of journaling practice. Because if you start journaling, you can't do that for a long period of time without discovering what's actually going on inside.
I am a big journaling buff. From my days, one of the first self-development books I ever came across was Julia Cameron's The Artist's Way.
There's another snap, my love. That was my very first one as well. Yeah, it's amazing, right?
She's about to bring out another book called The Listening Path, and I'm part of a beta group for that. It'll be coming out in January. And that, again, similar, the journaling, the looking after yourself, but also being very mindful of the noise around you. What's going on that you're not even conscious of? So this is mindful awareness. What are you subjecting yourself to that maybe you could change, or you switch off the beeps and the alarms that annoy you? Listen to the birds when you go out for a walk, rather than just the fact you've got to walk the dog and get another task checked off your list. Live a little. And that's what we're talking about, being gentle with yourself, because there's a lot of power in going within to come out and lead and rise.
And I think that's a critical piece there. It's, if we are gentle with ourselves, we find our strength. Because most people think that being gentle with themselves is a form of weakness, or that they're not strong enough. But it's until we bring in that compassion or that gentility with ourselves that we don't actually discover the root of our true strength as human beings.
It's been such an interesting talk today, Jo. And honestly, I've got so many people in my own network who speak so incredibly highly of you and One of Many. How can people best come and find out more?
Well, they can come on over to the website. It's oneofmany.co.uk, and they can even download those rituals that I was talking about earlier on the website there. So you can come and check that out. Follow us on social. I'm on Instagram. It's Dr. Joanna Martin is my Instagram handle. And we've got, a great Facebook community for One of Many. So if you search One of Many Women, you'll find us.
Fabulous. Well, thank you so much for coming and sharing that with us today. And guys, if you're listening and you know that you're supposed to be having a bigger impact in the world and it's not happening for you because you're push, maybe it's time to just be a little bit softer, step back, because when you step back, you are much more likely to receive the insights on what you need to do to spring forward. But you can't do that if you're constantly on that treadmill. Thanks for listening, guys. Take care.
Thank you for listening to Entrepreneurs Get Visible. To get your free checklist on how to raise your profile and to find out about our community, go to annaparkernaples.co.uk/get visible.